All right,
I can always
everybody.
get the mic ready to go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. So excited to be here because we got some exciting topics to talk about today. So, uh, like we always say, we put an analysis into those topics. This
Yeah.
is not about, we're not a media outlet here.
Yeah.
So just to put that on record. And the whole idea for this is to put that perspective for our viewers, for you,
Yeah.
to really understand the changing dynamics, for you to have that clear picture of what this is all about.
Yeah.
So this is basically what we're gonna be. What topics are we gonna be covering today? We
All
got
right.
more than one, right?
So we have 4 topics today, and they're all of them are very, very
Good.
interesting. So the first topic is, the G20 summit happened, and we now sort of have the fallout of the G20 summit. What happened? We have the communique, and then we also have a couple of super interesting pieces of the summit.
Mhm.
The first one is that a mega deal was struck between India, the EU, United States, and Saudi Arabia because they announced sort of a competitor to the BRI, which is called.
we will detail all this as
Yes.
we go. For now, just let us know the 3 topics we're going to be
All
covering.
right. So that's the first one. The second one is there was a very stark difference between the Ukraine-Russia conflict narrative in this G20 summit versus the last one. So the G20 stepped down their position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict because the G20 nations are torn about it.
Very, very interesting perspective.
Very interesting.
We'll detail into that.
And so we have the communique. We'll dive into that.
Great.
The next one is that China banned iPhones for government employees.
Okay. I can see the writing on the wall for that.
Well,
what lies ahead?
So did Apple for $200 billion. So
big one.
Yeah. Huge loss for Apple.
Great.
And why China decided to do it.
Okay.
Then finally, something that I particularly think is very
dangerous.
Dangerous.
I'll use the term that.
I would agree with dangerous.
Yeah, that's for the NATO.
Yep.
Naval exercises in the Baltic. This is a very problematic, and we will detail all of this and go.
And about this one, it's not just a naval exercise. This is much bigger than that.
You know how you can tell always? By the length of the exercise. This is going to drag for 2 weeks.
2 weeks and 40,000 people.
It's very dangerous.
Huge. It's a big problem. So
great.
Let's dive in.
Well, before we get into this, we want just to remind our viewers about we're gonna do for the course the tomorrow, I think.
No, it's today.
Today. Oops.
There is a welcome call for the How the Government Works or Doesn't today. David's going to be holding it at 7 p.m. tonight. So this is kind of your last chance to get the coupon code. The coupon code is GT20. Go to geopoliticsandconflict.com/US.
Mm-hmm.
David is teaching a live government course because all of these things that are happening, if you don't understand how the United States government actually works, they're going to be a giant mystery to you.
Perfect.
So if you're interested, check it out at the link below.
And I'll take this opportunity quickly here, guys, to say thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time here, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. We greatly appreciate it. Let's dive into the first topic, the G20.
All right. So G20, the first one is the mega deal that was established versus via a memorandum of understanding between India, European Union, United States, and Saudi Arabia, who is a very interesting dual player here.
Yeah.
Because remember how close Saudi Arabia is getting to China.
Well, isn't that the Biden administration called the MBS the pariah?
Yeah.
And we're going to have to hold him to justice. And what happened after that? As a matter of fact, it's all hypes. This is one thing you guys need to understand about when it comes down to international politics. Like I always say, in international relations, context matters.
Absolutely.
Suffice it for them to say in the G20, we signed a memorandum of understanding. We're going to have a corridor from India all the way to Europe. This is nothing but just an idea.
Yeah.
Memorandum of understanding, they can be overlooked. You know how many agreements have been written, but nothing moved forward?
Right.
This is no different, guys. So, don't fall for it because here's the thing. you already have countries objecting to it.
Yeah.
You know which one? Turkey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Turkey has already said there will be no corridor without going through Turkey anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you guys think make Turkey strategic? The reason why they are in NATO, not because of the country itself or their military capabilities, even though they have some, but it's because of its strategic location.
Yeah.
So all these hypes about the G20 they're going to build corridors and all that, it just hypes.
Well, and interestingly enough, exactly what you're saying, David, the reality of building a corridor is so substantial. How long has China been working on the BRI?
And
they're still working on it, right?
it's,
So building infrastructure takes an enormous amount of time, effort, money, and willpower.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice that they're saying, oh, well, we're going to start on this. But they're a decade behind the BRI right now.
Yeah.
And so, there is some interesting alliance here.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't feel like much.
No.
You're absolutely
and
right.
let along the statement, it says that the massive project, guess what was the next word?
Cost.
No. Backed by the United States.
Right.
Well, wait a minute.
Right.
If we are to say backed by the United States, how can we back something way out there when we couldn't fix our own problems here? Infrastructure is crumbling.
Yeah.
You and I know that.
Yep.
We drive, we see. How can we go and back something over there when we don't even have money to address our issues here and sending the money to Ukraine?
Right.
So what happened to the Build Back Better?
We didn't, in fact, build back better.
Yeah. So,
which, quite frankly, I think was a very good thing. A lot of things get shoved into legislation that have nothing to do with the legislation itself. And that was another one of those cases.
That's true.
But
and this is why it's going to be nothing but hypes.
Right.
Now, one thing you guys need to understand, put in my geopolitical analyst hat, I feel comfortable. And this is, I agree with some economists. One of them is by the name, believe it or not, I dig him up, Mr. Omar in the Middle East. He's an economist. And I couldn't agree more with his assessment also. Because all this is political.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely
Has nothing to do with economics.
Yeah.
It's political. And it's aimed at one specific aspect. And that aspect is the Belt and Road Initiative. That's what's at the heart of it. They won't be able to compete with that. If you noticed, I had access to see the map in a foreign language.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it here because it's in a foreign language. People is not going to understand. What's interesting about it is that where the route because it's going to be two, the northern route, north, and one on the east. One of them with the railroads, one of them it goes through the ships, right? But that's not the point. The point is where the direction is. What the direction is avoiding all countries in Central Asia.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because Central Asia, if you know history a little bit, so it has always been historically the country that controls the dynamics on the global stage, always had control over the Eurasia.
Yeah.
Eurasia has always been, you go back to the Brits, and even before them, the Portuguese, or even before them, way back. Eurasia has always been the key.
Yeah.
But also what's going to be happening in Eurasia, that's where the BRI route is going to go.
Yep. And so I think it's interesting that they're even sort of attempting this, especially at this late stage. And I would love your opinion on why they're attempting this at this late stage, because, it's been a very interesting anti-China, and we're not pro or anti-China. It's not about,
we're beyond that.
It's actually not about being pro or anti anything. It's about looking at the landscape the way that it is and assessing it the way that it is without a bunch of emotions attached to it.
Yeah.
So the reality is that this is a very late to the game kind of initiative.
Very.
So what is the point of starting an initiative like this at this time? And especially you're absolutely right talking about the cost of it. So the proposed cost might be about $20 billion. And honestly, it'll probably be more. 20 billion seems like a very low ball estimate
for something like that.
For something like this. But you're absolutely right. So what really is the point of trying to do this right now?
And who's going to be funding that?
And who's going to be funding
it's all about talks.
Yeah.
That's like when you hear, for example, when there's a catastrophe, we'll give the example of what happened in Maui.
Oh,
Did you know that what's her name? Oprah saying,
Oprah, yeah.
I'm gonna, donate in sort of I
Yeah.
want to support the cause in Maui.
Right.
But that's not her money.
Yeah.
That's coming from people.
Right. That's
Except
coming
that
from
carries
us.
her name.
Right. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
why the heck will I give her money instead of giving it directly to the people?
Right.
That will be the same for something similar to this. We say we backing that up with what?
Right. No, that's a great question.
Yeah,
With
when we
what?
are struggling here.
Absolutely.
I think the reason why you are seeing a statement like that from G20, which
Mhm.
by the way, I'm a believer that G20 is nothing but an echo chamber,
Yeah.
no more no less, because it's gone. That
Yeah.
G20 used to be about economics,
Mhm.
about cooperation. Once you turn an entity like that into a conduit to push your own agenda, we all know what I'm referring to here. So
Absolutely.
it's straightforward. But what they're trying to do is basically will be a pivot to undermine the change into the international economic development.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. The way you do it is you want to slow down that change.
Yeah.
Because the world is moving, has been. I mean, if I am to say the last 7, 8 years, it
Mhm.
has been moving gradually into multipolar system.
Yeah.
And what comes with that? A change into the global economic order.
Absolutely.
And that's what we are witnessing. So for them to announce this is nothing but a bravado.
Yeah.
Intended at one objective is to slow down that momentum.
Yeah.
That ain't gonna work.
Well, and it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me the countries that are in this specifically. So we have India
Mhm.
and we have Saudi Arabia, both who have been getting a lot closer to China
China.
lately.
Mm.
And so you have, the EU and the US, I understand, right? That I get.
Yeah.
But we have a whole sort of situation about India sort of playing both sides in some interesting ways.
Mhm.
And I want to show in the next section a photo of Modi
Yeah.
with MBS and Biden, and then also another photo of Modi with Sergei Lavrov
Lavrov.
from
Mm.
Russia. So I'll show that in the next section. But some interesting politics are happening behind the scenes that we don't know about.
Mhm.
And I'm very curious as to why India and Saudi Arabia have joined this particular situation.
Well, first of all, don't assume that they are already joining. When I say they, mainly Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
To Saudis is nothing but some sort of feel me good gesture towards the Americans. Saudis and Americans do not see eye to eye. This is why, FYI, guys, which has not been reported and it's not classified. Did you know that there are no tensions inside the monarchy in Saudi Arabia?
Oh,
That the royal princes
yeah,
are revolting against MBS.
that's interesting.
One thing you guys need to understand, and I wrote the book about the Saudis and I
Yeah.
detail these aspects. There are over 2,000 princes in, but what's interesting, each one of them has his own tribe, his own clique,
Yeah.
and they are turning on MBS
Wow.
gradually. You
Yeah.
don't hear much about it. Usually when something happens like that,
Yeah.
that means it's been pushed from outside.
Yeah.
And the country that comes to mind is the US. Why? Because
Sure.
we do have a close relationship, especially with their intelligence service.
Yeah.
That is the reason why. So for MBS to do this, King Salman, but King Salman, he's old, he's sick, he's
Yeah.
not. It's MBS the de facto. It's just to make Biden feel okay.
Yeah.
Because you remember
Very interesting.
the tensions between the two.
Yeah.
So I will say more India than Saudi Arabia. But
Mhm.
even for India, what does India have to offer?
That's a great question.
Yeah, what does India have to offer when its own infrastructure is decaying? You hear, I read an article released by an entity within the UN, especially when India calling itself the mother of democracy, and yet targeting Muslims and atrocities in Manipur.
Yeah.
But that's beside the point. The idea of the infrastructure for India to support something like this doesn't exist.
Right.
So to go back to your point, it will be more for India than it is for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely correct about how both countries, but mainly Saudi Arabia, is getting closer to.
Yeah.
What we are trying to do is to woo India out, to use it because we want to use India.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one's going to keep an eye on China.
Yeah.
So
And
that's the way I see it.
India has played a very interesting role over the last maybe year or 2 years with both.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how this goes, because this was kind of a big summit for India in general, for New Delhi in general, because they kind of got to be the top dog during it, because Xi didn't attend, Putin didn't attend.
Yeah, so you get the major.
Yeah.
So to me, the G20 is nothing but a failure. It's just an echo chamber. No more, no less.
Well, speaking of echo chamber, let's dive into our next topic.
Sure.
In this regard, because there was one issue in which it was not an echo chamber, and that is that the summit communique seems to have taken a big step down on the topic of Ukraine and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So the last summit very much denounced Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That wasn't the case here. And looking at their official communique. And so there was a very big shift between the countries that sort of support Russia and China and the countries that don't. And even though French President Emmanuel Macron came out and denounced it and said this G20 confirms once again the isolation of Russia, today an overwhelming majority of G20 members condemn the war in Ukraine, its impact. That may be what he said, but that's not what the communique says. Would you like to take a look at the communique?
Sure.
So the communique's language was very, very watered down. So let's take a look at it. All right, let me add it. All right, so let's take a look at this specific language. Concerning the war in Ukraine. Let's see if I can make it bigger. That's too big. While recalling the discussion in Bali, we reiterated our national positions and resolutions adopted at the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly, and underscore that all states must act in a manner consistent with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter in its entirety. Okay. In line with the UN Charter, all states must refrain from the threat or use of force to seek territorial acquisition against territorial integrity and sovereignty or political independence of any state. Okay, this one is big and important, and I very much hope that it gets actually listened to. The use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. So I do hope that agreement really holds.
Yeah.
Reaffirming that the G20 is the premier forum. Okay, so let's see. We highlight the human suffering and negative added impacts of the war in Ukraine with regards to the global food and energy security supply chains, macro financial stability, inflation and growth. And that is not the reason we have inflation. I'm just going to point that out, which has complicated the policy environment for countries, especially developing and at least developed countries, which are still recovering from the pandemic, and the economic disruption, which has derailed progress towards SDGs. Okay, that's big because that's very different. And I want to point out that if the same countries had the same standings as they did last year, I don't think this would have changed in this way. So, David, what is your take on why the narrative has shifted so substantially and coming out of the G20?
Well, it's simple. It's because Russia threatened not to support the communique beforehand. Straightforward.
Yeah.
And India understood that Russia will stand its ground because a communique, if it's not approved by everybody, then it won't move forward.
Yeah.
So they had to water down the language of it. And even though the US was trying to pressure that, because that's what the forum is used for, half of those members are US allies.
Yeah.
So that's why G20, G7, it's all becoming nothing but because of Russia has threatened not to support the final communique. So because that will be a massive failure for India as a host. I remember India is all about Nothing that shines is gold. Remember
Mhm.
that. So this is where the problem, I think, for India is more about the surface rather than the substance of things.
So let me share this picture of Modi. Can you see it, David?
Yeah, not yet.
Let me
So
add
let
it.
me know.
Okay, so
There
let
we
me
go.
share this picture of Modi. So this is from Outlook Business and Money, but I mean this is them signing it, right? So here, who do we have? And I specifically want to point out this hand shake situation going on
Yeah.
here. So this is a very interesting image. Now, I would like to highlight another image. Now, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and
That's
it's
true.
not a video, but look at this image. Who is this? This is Modi and Lavrov.
Well, it's because Modi wants to make sure to stay on the good graces of Lavrov, because Lavrov could have object to the final communique. So
Absolutely.
that's
But if we're looking at what's going on behind the scenes, because this is a behind the scenes candid photo, and the other one is a posed photo. So I'm just putting this out there. I think that it is a very interesting difference that is
to think about.
to something to think about. This is food for thought.
It's true.
All right. There is one more thing about this G20 summit that stood out very heavily to me, and that is the African Union becoming a permanent member of G20. The African Union becoming a permanent member of G20, I think that when they did it, they said, Prime Minister Modi said this will strengthen the G20 and also strengthen the voice of the global South. Okay, why is it interesting that the African Union has now been admitted as a permanent member when we are seeing such a heavy play by China and Russia in Africa? And we're seeing the loss of colonialization in African nations.
But you add to that, beside the heavy presence, the sentence should also completed with the loss of Western colonialism in Africa.
Absolutely.
I'll put them all in one sentence,
Yeah.
because that's a reflection for the current geopolitical realities on the ground in Africa. That's the way I see it. So they are seeing that the resources, the Western powers, mainly France and Germany to a degree, US to a degree, but mainly France, they seem they're losing grip on that. As a matter of fact, now France, to my knowledge, this morning I had to read something from France, and they are making arrangements now with the individual countries in Central Africa to maintain the military agreements.
Yeah.
But it's not going to hold. It's because now any country that see cozying up to France will be perceived as that's why I predict in a matter of time, Nigeria, not Niger, Nigeria might end up experiencing something. There is already a conversation internally as to what its president, Tinubu, is doing.
I believe that. I believe that.
So this is within that context of, African Union, it's going to now, because to me, Africa is now or never.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's now or never.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And this is interesting timing. You always say this, David, nothing happens in a vacuum.
No.
So this is very interesting timing. So the African Union Commission head, Musa Faki Mahamat, wrote on X, which was once Twitter. I don't know if we can still call them tweets if it's X now. But he said this membership, for which we have long been advocating, will provide a propitious framework for amplifying advocacy in favor of the continent and its effective contribution to meeting global challenges. So why right now, if it has been so long advocated for, why is right now the moment that they got admitted to the G20?
Yeah, well, it's because also India that hosted the summit was always saying to itself, I would like to become the voice of the global South. Well, you can become the voice of global South when you still have internal ethnic tensions, major ones. Plus, economically, it's not going to work. So, and this is why I see personally, and this is my personal opinion, literally, if I am to sum it up as to what was G20 all about, it was nothing but a photo op, no more no less. Because this MOU about the corridor and all, it's nothing but hypes. As a matter of fact, we have I have one tweet here that I got from, you all remember Hussein Askari?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I put a tweet there, and I couldn't agree with him more on this, that G20 basically is nothing but a geopolitical empty shell, as his word. So I quote him on this one here, and he was right, and somebody who understands the dynamics of what sort of global economics is all about. And so for G20 to all of a sudden consider Africa as a member, that's also the US's way behind the scenes telling India, hey, you do this. Because remember, that's what we do. We can sometimes tell countries what to do. Otherwise, how would you explain the trip of Biden after this to Vietnam? Didn't go to Japan, didn't go something. We went to Vietnam because we wanted to ensure that Vietnam doesn't. Well, guess what? You know what? But also, you know why he went there? Is because within next, I think, 2-3 weeks, there will be a visit by President Xi to Vietnam, to Hanoi. So,
I mean, we're watching that competition in real time. We're watching it unfold in real time.
And that's what geopolitics is all about. It's understanding your next move. I mean, not yours, but the enemy's, or the competitor, or whatever term you want to use. To me, to be a good geopolitical analyst, you anticipate where the movement's at. But to anticipate the movements, you have to put the pieces together.
Absolutely.
That's why the big picture is all about.
Well, and that's why we have a U.S. government course that you are teaching. Our welcome call is today, guys, and it is the last day to get 20% off of it. David is teaching a government course live. Welcome call and Q&A is today, because if you don't understand how the U.S. government works, then you don't understand what is actually going on in the world, and you can't make the best decisions for yourself.
And the good thing is, in a course we can talk.
Yes, and that brings me to the next thing. We have a Rumble, because sometimes it's very frustrating. We love you, YouTube. We love YouTube. We love being able to talk to you guys. We can reach a much larger platform here. But there's some things that YouTube just doesn't like it when people say things that, it doesn't really like.
Truth matters.
The truth matters, though. You're absolutely right. So we have a Rumble where we can talk about those things, and we're live on Wednesdays, same time.
Tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow. Yep.
Okay. I hope you guys join us tomorrow.
Yep. And it's rumble.com/c/geopolitics and conflict.
Perfect.
Awesome.
What is the next topic?
All right. The next topic is that China has banned iPhones for government employees. And they've banned them because they have concerns about Western spying through iPhones, because they have an always on microphone. So interestingly enough, I think we should also have a huge issue with the fact that our iPhones, which are currently next to us, have an always on microphone. But it's not unreasonable for anyone to think that their phone isn't spying on them. We have, you've probably experienced this too, where you say something, right? You talk about a certain brand, and then all of a sudden on your social medias and on the websites you visit, it shows up. Why is that? Because your phone is always listening to you, and it's terrifying. And somehow we push it out of our minds and say, well, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. Well, apparently China said it is that big of a deal. And for our government employees, we don't want them to have iPhones anymore. That led to, within 24 hours of that ban, that led to a loss of $200 billion in stock valuation for Apple.
It's about time. So what did we think is going to happen? Because China is going to tolerate that to a degree. So as a matter of fact, I just find out there are now problems inside Taiwan regarding the TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation, right? TSMC. Anyway, so I found that now their CEO now is waking up to the hard truth, and let alone for us here, the $70 billion project ain't gonna take off.
Yeah.
So now you got companies now saying we're not getting things done because we don't have access to.
Right.
So basically, where in a simple language, our policy backfired.
Yeah.
Which means it wasn't thought out. It was emotional reaction. And this is what happens when it comes down to foreign policy. This is why you never, ever allow emotions to dictate foreign policy.
Well, and never also, as much as you can, never allow emotions to dictate how you feel about global events, because the news wants you to be scared all the time. Because they're a business. And if you're not addicted to the news cycle, and if you're not having all these high emotions about everything that's going on all the time, then they don't have a product, and you don't keep tuning in, and you don't keep basically giving them a business. So it's important also to take emotions out of what's happening in the world and look at it flat. So one of those things is the fact that the Taiwanese-based chipmaker TSMC is maybe the top of the top in terms of chip making. And you just talked about the facility that's being built here in the United States. So according to that, the technology that building is apparently 8 years behind the most advanced technology.
It's not gonna work. I mean, the moment I heard about it a few months ago, because we don't have the infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I'm not referring just to the buildings and all that. That stuff can be managed. The finances can be managed. The brain power. We don't have that. I remember I showed you guys the tweet that I got as far as how much China produces when it comes down to STEM,
I think
science,
it's 2 million,
technology,
something like that,
and how much we produce a year.
It was like
there's nothing. So
200,000.
here is where now things are. It's going to be very dicey for us here technologically, and I am sure the company is going to push back behind the scenes. Usually, this kind of stuff we won't never know about or hear about or see, whatever. What just happened is just Saudi Arabia now has agreed to sign a massive deal with China regarding cloud data.
Oh God.
Massive.
Wow.
You're looking at about the Chinese rather will train about 200,000 Saudi developers. Which means what?
That's
Saudis
huge.
put in massive amount of money.
So,
and if I am to go back to that handshake with Biden and MBS, it's nothing but a photo op. We don't like the fact that Saudi is pivoting east. I've been saying this for years, even before I wrote the book about Saudi, because Saudis are watching the wealth shifting from the west to the east. It's been. So why do you think they went ahead and signed the deals as far as accepting the petrol yuan? Why do you think BRICS went ahead and admitted Saudi Arabia? Those things don't happen in a vacuum, and that is the reason why you need to understand the economic and political movements within the global stage. Those have to be a reaction to what lies ahead. What can we anticipate? And that's what a strategist or an analyst does. You have to anticipate and think ahead. Saudis are not dumb just because they wear a turban and sitting in a desert. I used to go to the desert and just hang out there, and I don't even know if I still have a picture here.
Oh, that would be great. I would love to see a picture.
I keep that stuff here. No, I don't have it here. No, I don't. So the idea, just because they're sitting in there, they're smart also. They're thinking in terms of we're seeing the trends are headed. They're realizing that the US is losing its global power. And that's due to our own reckless policies.
Absolutely.
And now you're seeing what's taking place with this trade with China, and China's going to have now to push back, and they've been pushing back because they can afford it.
Right.
China can afford to do that.
Well, and it's not like China doesn't have its own economic issues.
No, they do. And every country.
And I want to point out exactly what you're talking about. When we're talking about conflict in Taiwan, right? So, over the last year, maybe 2 years, I guess, there's been so much talk about, democracy in Taiwan and, all of that. Take a look at what's happening in Taiwan. So the Taiwanese-based chip maker is basically the top of the top in terms of chips. So why would we be interested in having control over the chip maker? Why would China be interested in having control over these chip makers? So we're looking at, even when we're hearing, when we're hearing, oh, this is about ideology, this is about democracy, what is the economic thing that is going on in the background? And this right here is that, because within 24 hours of a ban, Apple losing $200 billion in stock valuation. Now, granted, I do very much believe that'll, some of that'll bounce back. I'm not a financial advisor by any stretch. That's just my, that's just my take on it. But that's a lot. There's a lot of money at stake here. There is a lot of market share at stake here for these large corporations. There's a lot at stake. And they're not going to be willing to lose that.
Yeah. Well, this is why it was like, I looked at it like a ticking bomb when Huawei did that. And I even found, let me share this with, if you want me guys to share this with you. All right, here, add it, and just listen carefully here. And I usually vet this stuff and try to read them first before I'll let any. Yeah, listen to that. Can you hear?
I don't think it's playing. There it is. We cannot. Maybe click on it. Maybe click on it. Nope. Yeah, there you go.
Mate 60 mobile device, along with the other devices as well. Hey friends, Mario Cavallo here. Welcome to Counterpoint China. Huawei dropped a bomb on the tech world a few days ago. And the release of the new Huawei Mate 60 mobile device, along with a couple of other devices as well, on SMIC, domestic China, 7 nanometer. Holy guacamole, as Batman would say. And it reminded me of a story from 30 plus years ago. I just happened to be reading Rising Sun by Michael Crichton. And as I was reading it, if you read how the description of the Japanese was, the rising Japanese, and we have to stop those Japanese. And it was just absolutely incredible. The identical way. All you have to do now, 30 years later, is just substitute the word China for Japan, and you have the exact same geopolitical rhetoric. And back then, the efforts, the sanctions, the Plaza Accords, they stopped Toshiba. They stopped Alstom. They stopped Japan dead in its tracks. They did. But the story is they didn't stop Huawei and they didn't stop China. And now we know 100% that they can't. The imperial overlords just can't. The only way they're going to be able to reverse the tide of what's happening, which is China rising as the third hegemonic power to world global superpower status. The only way that's going to end is by nuclear war, which will probably end the entire planet. So let's assume that while we think that the United States military industrial complex is crazy, that they are crazy, and that they're a bunch of psychotic.
Anyway, I just wanted to share this. It's a little bit long, but I just wanted to highlight to you the idea of, because we did that in the 80s. I remember at the time when Japan was way up, why do you think we introduced certain financial trickery, if I may use the term? Because we were concerned, because the economy of Japan was really moving faster than we couldn't even anticipate. And we said to ourselves, heck no, we're going to have to stop this on its tracks and limit it. How do you hear anything about Japan now?
Absolutely not. In fact, their economy is probably the most indebted economy in the world.
It's Huawei with this case now, it became evident that the Chinese wanted to avoid the same outcome.
Yeah.
So by embarking on their own, even as a matter of fact, some countries in Europe are regretting, including India, India kicked Huawei because it was pressure to do so. But they are now regretting not having allowing Huawei technology, because they will improve their own infrastructure. But that's their own decision. They can decide. So this is why what I do see coming here in the US is you're going to have now major tech companies pushing against the administration. But I think that train has already left the station. I just don't see China sitting down with the US. Yes, they will sit for protocol, whatever. But that trust is gone, and there is no China moved on.
Right.
That's the way I see it.
Well, and specifically talking about what you're alluding to,
yeah,
China moved on because it can. And that's a very important piece of information here, because a lot of these things have not happened until now. It's not like this is the first time that anybody realized that there was a forever on microphone on Apple products, right? This isn't new information. And like I said, I think we should be very much more concerned about that than we are. But there's a reason they did it right now.
That's true.
And that's because they can right now. And I want to, this is something you and I have actually talked about a couple of times. I want to share the cables, the internet cables that are actually running under the ocean, because we don't actually know how many cables there are. Like, we as a people, there's information about that, which I'm about to share. In fact, I'm going to add it to the screen right now. So this is the submarine cable map. And this is a very, very cool, very cool thing. And I'm going to, if you guys want to check it out, it's submarine cable map. Okay, this right here is all of the internet cables that run through the oceans. Now, I want to point something out. Look at how many cables come in and out of, I'm going to get rid of this, show all cables. All right. Look at how many cables go in and out of the United States. Okay. So we're looking at the bulk of the cables actually being processed through the United States. Here's the deal with that. We have a giant NSA. The United States is known for spying. And on what planet does anybody think that it's not going to be processed through our spy technologies, right? And that's just reasonable. That and in some ways that actually is, helping national security. In some ways it's a massive overreach to spy on everybody, but in some ways, I see both sides of the argument, though I would like to have less
but when
dangerous oversight.
But when they do it on your citizens, that becomes even a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So
absolutely, and a lot of people are talking about that.
That's the major one.
But look at all of these cables. They're really, for the most part, they're coming in and out of the United States. Okay. So I'm gonna look up Shanghai. All right. Here's what's happening though. What's happening though is, so I want to point out the Shanghai cable. This doesn't run through the United States. Where does it go? It does go to Australia. It does hit parts of Africa, parts of over here in Pakistan, and all the way up through the EU. What this allows for is China to have lines of communication that are not being tapped by the NSA, at least directly, because they're not being tapped through the United States. There's some interesting ways that you can tap into these, right? You can take a submarine and go down, and so I'm assuming governments are doing that. But overall, we're starting to see, and then there's another one actually. Remember that the naval exercise where China came through over by Alaska. Okay, so this is reported, but check out what's over here. Check out what is now over here by Alaska. What do we have here? We have a cable that does not, in fact, go through the United States.
You go over it.
I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
Well, China does. It's not a secret. China does not. It has its own cables that they don't go through the U.S.
Right.
And that's for ensuring its own information is not compromised. They are doing the same in space with data. That's why they're going to go through their own GPS, not through the US. Where the I won't use the term danger, but where the challenge moving forward with that is that China's going to develop a capability through that Beidou, Beidou, from a military aspect in space, which you will be able to blind all the satellites.
Yeah.
That is where, it's a capability. This is no different than what they just developed now, which doesn't get much coverage. I read on that in certain military magazines. China just developed now technology to track a submarine. This technology, I mean, most countries have that who have the similar. Now, this one is very advanced. Even the deepest submarine we can send, they will be able to track it, which means now
from space.
Yeah, well,
right.
So far, the one from here.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether the space is, I don't know.
Okay.
The one I read about is the capability here on the ground that they have now the technology to track. So basically, we can't hide anymore.
Yeah.
And there's no matter how much depth we go, they develop that technology. So this has to do with this? Maybe not. But one thing for sure, China runs its own cables.
Yeah.
So, and just to tie it back to our topic, with now Huawei announcing that and the launching of this Mate 60 phone, which cost about, I think, 700. So already saw
less than an iPhone.
Yeah, saw a line of that. So Apple's gonna be hit hard. Let alone
they
just
already have been.
Moved some of its operations out of India.
Yeah,
because it wasn't working. So what I will expect is that probably Tim's gonna reach out to the White House and say, "Hey, we need to have a conversation."
Well, quite frankly, it would be nice, Apple, if you wanted to take the forever listening microphone off of all of our phones.
Yeah, it would be nice.
That would be nice. I would appreciate not being spied on all the time to sell advertising too.
But there's one thing that's just FYI for you guys to know, for us, especially if you are an American. Anytime iPhone come up with whatever, they have to turn over the key, the encryption key to the government. Yeah. So
and maybe that factored into why China put this ban on.
So one thing is sure now is that now we're seeing the technology path now is being split up.
It is.
Yeah, a split up is gonna go.
And it's been interesting because Tim Cook and Elon Musk actually both sort of did this.
Yeah.
With all of the narrative, with all of the anti-China narrative that's going on, those are two specific CEOs who have been very careful about not saying anything bad about China.
Yeah.
And that's because they didn't want to lose. Didn't want to lose that market. Unfortunately, right now they are losing that market. They're losing that market share in a huge way.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting, the positions that everyone is sort of taking on China, because I always say this, we are not pro-China. We are not anti-China. This is more about talking about what is actually happening here in a non-emotional, very straightforward way. Because if you don't have the information, you're going to be surprised when things start to happen and shift dramatically, which they're doing right now.
That's why we call being objective.
Yes, being objective. Yeah. All right. Last topic for today.
Let's do last topic here.
Last topic for today. And honestly,
leave it till next time. How about it?
What?
What time? We're still on?
Yeah.
Okay.
NATO.
I kind of okay. Did we cover everything?
We did not.
Okay.
So this one is actually the most scary to me. And this actually legitimately concerns me. And that is NATO is preparing for its biggest military exercise since the Cold War. And it's to simulate, I guess, according to the Financial Times, it's to simulate what an attempt would be to repel Russian aggression against one of its members. So the Financial Times writes this: NATO is preparing its biggest live joint command exercise since the Cold War next year, assembling more than 40,000 troops to practice how the alliance would attempt to repel Russian aggression against one of its members.
Okay.
Guys, don't do that. because that is, so it's called the Steadfast Defender NATO war drill, and it's set for early 2024. I think it's February and March. And it's
Okay, that's why when you said 40,000, didn't sound right to me. But
that's what the Financial Times says.
yeah, but when you mentioned 2024, it
Oh,
made
yeah,
sense
yeah.
because I have a different numbers.
Oh,
It's
okay.
3,000.
Yeah.
It's 3,000 with 30 ships, but that's next week.
Right.
So that's why I was like, wait a minute.
Oh,
So
okay, got
I'm
it.
glad
Yes.
you mentioned 2024.
2024.
No, there is one that is going to be going on. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, it's in the Baltics as we speak for 2 weeks. That includes 30 ships and 3,000, mainly coming from Sweden.
Yeah.
So that is very problematic. What's problematic about it?
Huge.
It's the location
Yeah.
in Baltics. So later along, we are thinking of sending some type of missiles to Ukraine. Of course, Victoria Nolan has been pushing for this.
Mhm.
Where the danger I see for that is Russia's not going to be thinking twice about preparing its tactical and strategic.
Yeah.
They're going to have to. They already started activating Alexander,
Yeah.
Iskander, which is a very I don't know about the Sarmat. Sarmats, those are very highly advanced, and but the fact that the Russians are activating those just in case tells me they are not taking any chances.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like Russia doesn't bluff.
Well, the problem is
know?
why NATO is one. Why is NATO want to have a war with Russia? That's to me
Yeah.
that why they because that I saw an image of what it's. Did you know that the reason why Elon Musk cut off the Starlink to Ukraine?
To Ukraine.
It's because the plan was to attack the Russian ships on the Black Sea.
Yeah.
And if they do that, Russia is going to retaliate with the nuclear tactical and they'll wipe out everything.
Well, and that's the craziest thing to me. I actually agree with this completely. Why provoke Russia? It in the Ukraine situation, we've heard this a couple of times where the narrative is, and this is actually not the narrative I think coming directly out of the US or Western countries, but I remember Zelensky was saying, we are here guarding Russia from guarding the rest of Europe from Russia's attack on Europe. And this is my personal take on it, but I don't see Russia going out and saying we're ready to attack the rest of Europe. That's not what I'm seeing.
And Russia is not interested in that. Russia was never interested in that. That's one thing that those who do not know history a little bit about understanding. Remember when we had Mike Grupa and explained just from the perspective of Poland, Polish people, even Polish people, the younger generation, they don't know the history of so Russia was never intended into has never intentions rather to take over Europe. They are not interested in that, and they won't do it. First of all,
and I don't think do they have the resources
they
to
don't
do
have
that.
The manpower to do. They're not interested. Where the challenge that created all this was because we planned to push Europe away from Russia economically, because we started to see the developments of European economy was moving forward. And that due to access to cheap energy. I've always said this, that if you as a country have access to energy, it will reflect on your economic outlook.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we didn't want to, because we start to see that with Germany. I mean, just go back 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Go back 10 years ago and think about where the German economy was.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Right.
Not anymore. The German economy is slowly collapsing. So we didn't want Europe to be strong. We didn't want Germany to get too close to Russian. And this was one way of creating this, using the comedian President Zelensky for that. But what you do, the guy is not a... The guy's a comedian.
Yeah.
What his end is not gonna be pretty. I mark my word on it. Mark my word on it, because I am referring to historical events that took place. For example, just go back to what took place in Chile.
Yeah.
With a
lot of leaders
to certain, well, some
in
who were,
untimely
yeah,
situations.
and
Look at
those
Prigozhin.
yeah, and those who were in his situation, that will be the change that I see coming. And even now, you have a conversation inside Ukraine.
Yeah.
People are start to talk.
Well, the Ukrainian people have been suffering for a long time now.
Yeah.
I mean, their country, a large percentage of their country is in rubble. And for what, I think, is the big question.
Yeah.
For why is this happening? And that's my big question with both the exercise that's coming
Yeah.
up and the exercise that's coming up next year, that is this, big thing. So apparently the Steadfast Defender, according to this FT report, says it will start in spring of next year and is expected to involve between 500 and 700 air combat missions, more than 50 ships, and about 41,000 troops, NATO officials said.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? And if somebody can tell me in the comments what indications do they have that Russia is going to try and attack a member NATO state, NATO member state,
Yeah.
I'm very open to hearing, what that is. I just haven't seen it.
No, it's just pretext, no more, no less. So it's if they know NATO command, they understand. For example, the Russia has a weapon called the Poseidon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
Yeah.
Poseidon. Yeah.
Yeah, they know Russia will wipe out whatever, but we know it's the end, and that is why I hope some cool heads will prevail in preventing this. But
I really
and this
agree.
is where you're seeing now. I'm starting to see a trend moving slowly that we might end up seeing the emergence of an alliance between 4 countries:
Okay.
Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran.
Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
okay, speaking to that, where is the North Korean leader right
Today,
now?
he's in Moscow.
He's in Moscow.
Yeah.
And we might do a show on that. Maybe we'll do it on Rumble. But no one's really talking about that.
No,
North
that's
Korea.
what I see. That's what I see coming. It's an alliance, and that's going to be of military nature. It's not economic. Economic is part, but it's going to be military because they're seeing what's taking place, and they're going to have to figure it out. You think about it like tactically.
Yeah.
You got the North Korea, you got Russia, you got China, then you got Iran.
Yeah.
Geographically, those are where the hot spots are, in addition to Africa to a degree. But for Africa, also will be of interest because North Korea just reestablished ties with Burkina Faso.
Right.
Well, Burkina Faso is receiving military aid from North Korea, but also receiving arm vehicles from China. So that's, to me, what I see coming down the pipe is this conversation that's going to be between Kim Jong-un and the Russian president. It will be about that military dimension of the relationship and possibly the alliance.
Hugely important. Hugely important. We're not hearing very much about it. I mean, if almost anything.
Nah, they're staying quiet about it.
Yeah, but then we get this, big military exercise. And what I wonder is if that's real, if there really is intentions to do this big military exercise, or if it's something that's being put out there as a sort of threat or like a hype. Because this is
sometimes with something like this, you send the message ahead of time, way ahead of time, because you want to create not a diversion, but rather to influence the direction of events.
Exactly.
But the ones that they are conducting in the in the Baltic, I'm sorry, not the Black Sea, but the Baltic Sea, will be about 30 ships to my knowledge and 3,000. Those are usually small scale stuff, but that depends again what type of weapons they're going to be using, what type of maneuvers. Once you understand, maneuvers is not about just going to the sea and fire, whatever.
Yeah.
It also has to do with the type of targets you are aiming at. Sometimes you can do a mock attack or a mock bombing or mock whatever. You use a missile and target something. I didn't detail any of that yet, but the fact that they are doing this close to, that's to me irresponsible.
I think it's irresponsible too.
So they dig in. I hope they are not digging their own grave, shall we say? We use the term, because at some point, Russians, they can only tolerate so much. Any country, for that matter, even China, regarding the Taiwan issue, they can only tolerate so much.
Right. And quite frankly, I don't really understand why the escalation is happening. And, even if the narrative is that it's to, fight for Ukraine and the situation, why is peace not the thing that's being considered? Why is it the next military operation and not you must come to the table and decide what the peace, what the terms of peace are, or we will do this. Why is it that they're just going to do this without the talk of actually coming together for peace? If that's the reason that they're going to do it, right?
Do you want the answer?
Yeah.
No money,
right?
And peace. So simple as it is. So, all right, guys, we hope you find this informative, and remember what time we're doing the live.
Tomorrow, Rumble. Same time, different place on Rumble, because if you guys have noticed, there's some things that we're tiptoeing around a little bit, and that's because this is not quite the platform to do that on.
The topic tomorrow, we'll be talking about it, especially what's going on. So anyway, we look forward to seeing
Rumble tomorrow live at the exact same time. Rumble.com/c/geopolitics and conflict. I put the link on the screen if you guys want to check it out. But yes, we got a comment last time that we're a lot more animated there, and a lot more because we're able to sort of speak freely. So we feel a sense of freedom.
There. It's sad enough that we have to be thinking that it exists here in America.
Yeah.
That's sad enough.
It does. Well, anyway, our phones are spying on us all the time, so it's not, know.
Anyway, guys, well, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. As always, prepare yourself for changing world order. Till next time.